When someone commits a crime, there's a lot that goes into it. Most people don't just wake up one day and say, I want to rob someone or I want to kill someone. There's almost always a buildup. Even if it is a snap decision, you can almost always point to things in a person's past that might have led to it. This is not to excuse anyone's crimes, of course. At the end of the day, we're all responsible for our own actions. But there is a lot of debate about how much certain people should be held accountable for wrongdoing and what elements of a person's past should be taken into consideration, especially when it comes to things like sentencing. Let's talk about Cindy White. Sarah Isabel Cindy White was born around 1957 and grew up in Indiana. She was one of 6 children, and her mother was an alcoholic. As a child, Cindy sought affection from her father and longed to be a daddy's girl, but the attention she ended up getting from him wasn't the kind she wanted. Cindy would later claim her father began sexually abusing her when she was about 8, and that it progressively got worse throughout her childhood. When she told her mother about the abuse, her mother simply told her not to be in the same room alone with her father. In 1971, when Cindy would have been about 14, her father died, but the damage was already done. At some point in her teens, Cindy was taken to a mental hospital for involuntary paralysis caused by emotional trauma. While she was in the hospital, her mother also died. It was around this time that she got to know the Roberson family, or Roberson, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. She met this family while on a paper route in her neighborhood and used to play with their kids. Charles Roberson and his wife had 4 children: 7-year-old Michael, 6-year-old Dale, 5-year-old Gary, and 4-year-old Rita, or Sissy. When Cindy was released from the hospital in the fall of 1975, the Robersons invited her to become their live-in nanny. But what seemed like the perfect opportunity went south quickly. It wasn't long before Charles Roberson began flirting with his new teenage nanny. At first, Cindy was flattered and liked the positive attention, but according to her, it wasn't long before the sexual abuse began. Cindy would later state that Charles would force her to watch porn and satisfy himself, in her words, as she watched. She also claimed to be forced to undress and engage in sexual acts, including bestiality, in front of other people. At first, Cindy assumed Charles's wife, Carol, didn't know about the abuse, but when she walked in on them one day, it was clear that she was not only in the know, but complicit. In the winter of 1975, Cindy tried to leave the house, but Charles Roberson locked her in a bedroom. He then went to the family's garage, got one of their kittens, brought it back, and decapitated it in front of Cindy. He said the same thing would happen to her if she didn't obey him. A few days after Christmas that year, Cindy's grandmother's house caught on fire. On New Year's Eve, Cindy talked to her sister-in-law about the fire and got an idea. If she set a fire in the Roberson house, she might be able to make it unlivable, in her words, and finally escape. She set the fire later that night near the Christmas tree. She would later claim that she never meant for it to get out of hand or for anyone to get hurt, but she soon realized that it was spreading fast. She woke up the rest of the family and tried to help them escape, but the smoke was too thick for her to find them, at least to lead them out of the house. She says she later lost consciousness and woke up outside on the ground. Another source said Cindy was seen leaving the back of the house screaming and had to be restrained to keep from going back inside. Cindy was taken to the hospital with burns on her arms and singed hair. Some sources said her injuries were minor, but others said she was in intensive care. She didn't learn until after escaping that she was the only survivor. The entire Roberson family had died in the fire, probably within a few minutes of it being set. Investigation into the fire began pretty quickly. At first, investigators thought it was an accident caused by faulty Christmas tree lights. But then they realized the Christmas tree was actually flame-proof, and a check of the house's wiring, Appliances, gas, and furnace all showed everything working fine. When they found nude photos of Cindy in Charles Robertson's wallet, as well as love letters by her to him, they started to get suspicious of her. Charles Robertson's body was found on the living room couch, badly burned. I believe his body was burned worse than anyone else's. Cindy initially told investigators she was asleep on the living room couch when the fire started, but she escaped with relatively minor injuries compared to the damage Charles Robertson's body had. This obviously created a hole in her story. Her pajamas were also made of flammable material, but didn't catch on fire. The evidence of a potential affair, along with the physical evidence, led to Cindy's arrest just a couple of months after the fire. Cindy went on trial in the fall of 1976. Prosecutors claimed she and Charles were having an affair, and she set the fire in anger. As far as I could find, they never specified exactly what she was supposed to be angry about. I assume they wanted people to think that she and Charles had been having an affair, but he refused to leave his wife for her. But that is just speculation on my part. In May 1976, Cindy White was convicted of arson and 6 counts of felony murder. Another source said first-degree murder by arson. She was eventually given 6 life sentences, along with an additional 5 to 20 years for the arson. After sentencing, Cindy was taken to Indiana Women's Prison, where she remains today. In a 2018 interview, she claimed she was 16 when she got to prison, but most sources say she was 18. She also said she was the youngest offender in the prison at the time. There has been at least one appeal of Cindy's case, but it was denied. A 1999 ruling determined she couldn't be released on parole because inmates serving life sentences at the time of her conviction weren't eligible for parole. I believe this is a national thing and not exclusive to Indiana, but I could be wrong. She's never been released on parole or otherwise, and probably never will be. So let's talk about some of the controversy in this case. For starters, Cindy's claims that she was abused, both by her father and the Robertsons. It was never brought up at trial because nobody knew about it at the time. In fact, Cindy didn't start publicly speaking about it until about 10 years after her conviction. She would later claim she stayed silent about the abuse out of embarrassment and chose to speak out when she did for her own healing and to hopefully help out someone else. Like I said earlier, Cindy initially told investigators she was asleep on the living room couch when the fire started. She now admits she set the fire, but said she never meant to hurt or kill anyone, especially the Robertson children, who she says she loved like they were her own. She only set the fire in an attempt to escape. According to Cindy's lawyer, Charles Asher, the abuse stunted her emotionally and affected her judgment and decision-making. She survived by denial, by keeping her mouth shut. She had learned what virtually all victims of extreme child abuse learn. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. Asher also seems to think Cindy's case would have turned out differently if it happened today. There are a lot of things that we know today that we didn't know then. The psychological care would have been different, and her defense would have been significantly different. There was never any sort of investigation into Cindy's alleged abuse since it wasn't public knowledge at the time. Other than her hospital stay in the 1970s, as well as her own words, there's not much evidence of it. Assuming it did happen, of course, it's understandable why she would wait so long to talk about it. I do wonder if things would have turned out differently had people known about the abuse when Cindy went on trial. Though from what I've researched, talking about child abuse was much more taboo in the 1970s than it is today. In addition to all of this, there is a lot of debate about life sentences for minors. According to most sources, Cindy was a legal adult when she was convicted and probably when she set the fire. However, I think a lot of these arguments could apply to her. Multiple studies and sources say a person's brain doesn't stop developing until they're 25. This is something you've probably heard before. According to an article on the University of Rochester's website, teenagers think with the amygdala, which is the emotional part of the brain, whereas adults think with the prefrontal cortex, which is the rational part of the brain. People opposed to life sentences for minors often point out the differences between an adult and child's brain. They also say children have the capacity to grow and change, and have more time to do it than adults. But as with any controversy, there are two sides to the issue. According to its detractors, minors, or in Cindy's case, teenagers, knew exactly what they were doing when they committed the crime that earned them a life sentence, usually murder. People have also said these criminals need to be in jail as justice for their victims and/or to keep other potential victims safe. One comment I found on a website called debate.org reads in part, "The normal human brain doesn't stop completely developing until the age of 22. Does that mean we should excuse anyone under the age of 22 for their crimes? I think not." I found this comment especially interesting. Whether you agree with it or not, I think it brings up an important question. At what age should we start holding people accountable for their actions? And in addition to this, how much should their past, especially things like abuse, be factored into their later sentencing? There is at least one petition to free Cindy White. Freya Ryan, who started the petition, says the goal is to support her cause and bring justice to her name. I'm not sure when it was started, but it still appears to be active, so I'll leave a link below if you're interested. So that's all I have for you today on Cindy White. This case did remind me a little bit of the Cameron Todd Willingham case, though if you've watched that video, you know there are some major differences as well. And as always, I would love to know your thoughts on this case and life sentences for minors or young offenders in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.